Welcome everyone. It is bang on 4 o'clock. We have some people lurking in the waiting room. So Simon is being the host with the mostest and letting them in. So we'll just wait for 30 seconds or so, and then we will start.
Hello, this is Paul.
Okay, so welcome to this webinar on what drives the need for silver bullets. I'm Steve Hearson and I'm joined by Simon Cavicchia. This is the second run of this webinar. We ran the same thing on Monday. There's one small tweak we've made, which hopefully will build on what we learned on Monday. But essentially it's the same thing that we did with people on Monday. So as we get into things, we are going to be here for precisely an hour. We won't go over. And just before we get into the introductions, just a wee bit on how we're going to work together. Very light touch contracting for us, just to encourage us to be fully present with your video on and other apps notifications off wherever possible. Mute when you're not talking. Would encourage you when we get you into the breakout rooms, because there is going to be a section where we throw you into small group for some conversations. Be as honest as you can be. The kind of territory we're exploring today is probably best served by us all individually and collectively being very honest with ourselves and with each other, and attending to being as polite and respectful as we can be, and be curious. Seek to understand rather than to judge. A wee bit on the technology. I'm going to work on the assumption that there are very few Zoom virgins amongst us, as after 4 months of lockdown, I think most of us have been walleyed around the head by Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and every other form of virtual conferencing that is out there. But just in case this is new to you, just the things to point out to you, there are your core commands, the ones most of importance to us today. Your mute and unmute on the bottom left, the video, the chat, and the view on the top right hand side. The other thing we're using today is something called menti.com. You should have seen in the joining instructions an invitation to go to the website before you join or to download the app. And the code you need is the one you can see on the left. Enter that code because shortly you will be invited to interact with us and interact with the subject, and we'll be using menti.com to do that. The other thing that enables me to do and Simon to do is enables us to both collect the data and present it back to you live, and I'll be making that available to you all as well. So after the webinar, I will give you access to the recording of the webinar, and just to reiterate, I am recording it, so if anybody has an issue with that, please let me know and I will not publish it, but hopefully you'll be okay. And I will send you all the data that has emerged from the menti.com interactions with people. So just to do a wee bit of practicing on that, if I can encourage you to go to menti.com, and one word for how you're arriving today: bilious. Wow. There's so many questions I want to ask of bilious. And this is the live data coming from us all as a group. I have a sense, my own experience of you putting these words up here is probably sums up my experience of the last 4 months, as I've gone through different emotional states in response to being shacked up in my house in Brighton with my lovely wife and daughter. So thank you. That gives us a sense of how we are arriving today. So let me just swap screens. Okay, bear with me. Right. And a second one, what questions are you coming with today? Is the second one. Which will give us a chance just to have a sense of what you are arriving with. Some lovely questions there. So hopefully you think some of those questions definitely we will answer. If I don't get to answer them, or Simon doesn't get to answer them during the hour we've got, then by all means drop me a line and I'm happy to carry on conversations. But I will tell you a little bit about how this project came into being and why this webinar today. So thank you. Those are some great questions. So just by way of introductions, I'm Steve Hearson. I am a consultant and facilitator, an occasional coach. My work in the last 20 odd years has probably taken place against a backdrop of, as much as anything else, of the impact of technology on human systems. I used to work at The Guardian many years ago, when my one minor claim to fame in life is I launched their dating service, Soulmates. So those of you who wish to meet a Guardian reader, please message me offline and I will tell you exactly what you need to put in your ad to meet that type of person. But it's easy. Normally you just say you don't read the Daily Mail, because the research showed that those two were like oil and water, no judgment either way. So much of my time has been in that territory. I worked at Roffey Park for 4.5 years. In the last couple of years, I've worked again as an independent. And Simon, I met a number of years ago. Simon was one of the tutors on the masters I did at Surrey. And he is also authoring the first chapter of this book, which I'll tell you more about shortly. Simon, do you want to say a bit about yourself?
Yes, just hello everyone. It's lovely to be with you, and I'm noticing some familiar, and I'm just choosing to believe, friendly faces, because it helps me manage my own anxiety. But really lovely to have you here. I divide my time these days between quite a bit of executive coaching, teaching and developing leaders for sort of the challenges of our times, and I'm also on the faculty at Ashridge on their Masters in Executive Coaching. So enjoy that very much. It kind of keeps me on my toes. So looking forward to the next hour together.
Thank you, Simon. So the menu, and I've done it in the form of a menu, as you can see. So a bit of a scene setting, a gazpacho of scene setting, plus a roasted side of audience interaction and inquiry, which will be coming from you. There's a bit of a meze, some initial findings from the 20-odd interviews I've done so far, and a couple of video excerpts from those interviews, so you can hear some of the voices and some of the responses to this question of what drives the need for certainty in leaders in organizations. And there is a dessert of something that doesn't exist, because there is no silver bullet. So it's an absence of a dessert, I guess. So I apologize for that, but for those with a sweet tooth, there is actually no dessert. A little bit of backdrop. If you do a search on Google at the moment, you will see, in response to the term no silver bullet, many, many responses. If you couple that with, for example, coronavirus or COVID-19, the term actually is appearing with huge regularity. And it seems, from my anecdotal observations, to becoming far more prevalent as a shorthand for there is no easy answer to our complex challenges in many different fields. My own interest in this stemmed over a number of years, but really kind of crystallized when I was at Roffey Park, when I hosted the Corporate Rebels, Pim de Moye and Houston Minar from Holland. And they were oversharing stories of their 2-year traipse around the globe as they sought to find out what the secret was to highly engaged and happy workplaces. And one of the things they said to the audience and the group we had that day was, well, we started our journey 2 years ago and we thought by the end of it, we'd find the answer. We'd find the silver bullet that we could then monetize and sell to everyone. Problem is, what we've discovered, there isn't one. And that is fair enough. And I kind of sat there and thought, well, that's no surprise to me. But what caught my attention was then 2 or 3 times after that, during the day, the audience, which was filled full of people like me who are in OD and leadership development, 2 or 3 times questions came at them, which were kind of flavored with, but there is an answer really, isn't there? Come on, guys. There must be one. And from that moment on, I kind of got hooked in the back of my head. Oh, this is really interesting. So here we are, we're a group of OD people, ostensibly used to working with complexity and ambiguity. And even we are pushing these two Dutchmen for an answer when they've just told us there isn't one. More recently, in the last 2 or 3 years working with clients, it became more clear, particularly as I work with clients who had lots of experience working with large consultancies, how there seemed to be this collusion between different parties to create a culture of dependency, but also always offering the faint hope that there would be a silver bullet. So the idea that major consultancies, or indeed boutique consultancies, have an answer to some extent is fueled by the need to sell products and services. And it gradually came clear to me that there, at least in my mind, there's a kind of interconnected set of parties who all have a vested interest in selling to clients some form of silver bullet. And that includes gurus and theorists. It includes people who sell methodologies, such as change methodologies like maybe ADKAR. It also includes the fields of practice like OD, HR, L&D, and change, the thought collectives, as someone recently described them to me as. And so this particular webinar came from conversations with Simon, where I said, well, it would be interesting to see what happened if we shared some of our initial ideas, particularly around the psychological factors that drive this need for certainty in leaders and organizations. So that's a wee bit of background on the project, and I'll tell you what's coming after this webinar at the end of the session. So another brief question. It would be good to get a sense from you. Do you believe there can ever be a silver bullet for complex challenges? There was one person on Monday who said yes. I've yet to track them down, and I'm hoping that they have got it, because if they have, then I'm hoping they can fix everything.
Jeff, if you're listening, you're in the wrong place, mate.
Beg your pardon?
I noticed that Jeff is putting chats rather than Menti.
Ah, okay. That's fine. I will bring my chat up. Thanks, Jeff. So if the person who typed yes would be willing to share in the chat what they think the silver bullet would be, that would be absolutely amazing. So let's move on. So in this first phase of research, I've interviewed approximately 20 people. That's included people like Glenda Ouyang from the Human Systems Dynamics Institute. I've interviewed Jervis Bush. I've interviewed Neil Morrison, who some of you may know from the HR world, who's HRD at a major water utility. I've also interviewed a number of people who are client side, mostly anonymous, 2 or 3 of whom actually have also got consulting experience, have worked in big consultancies. So I had their stories from both sides of that dance. And one of the more recent interviewees was Mark Cole, who's the author of a relatively new book on radical OD. And I asked all of the interviewees, amongst the questions was the question, so what do you think drives the need for certainty? And this was Mark's response. This technology will work. Okay, it doesn't, bear with me. Let's see why it's not working.
Oh, goody, I get to see everybody properly now that you're not screen sharing. Hi, everyone. Oh, feedback.
Okay, bear with me 1 second.
That's so nice.
Okay, Simon, can I suggest that you do your piece and I'm going to come back to the video?
Okay, can you tee up the slide? Because
Absolutely. Apologies, people.
I guess there is no silver bullet for presenting also.
There's no, exactly. Thank you, Alpa. Okay, good. So I just wanted to share some thoughts of mine. I mean, they're not mine, but the synthesis is something that I've kind of pulled together. I mean, I've spent the last 20 years really of my coaching and consulting practice in conversations with leaders who, one way or another, are experiencing some kind of stretch. In other words, the circumstances that they find themselves in, the challenges that they face at an organizational level are beyond their existing capacity to make sense of and respond. So what they've relied on in the past to orient them is no longer working, or they're doing more of the same and trying harder. And not only are they not getting the results that they want, they're creating a whole series of unintended negative consequences. So implicit in a lot of those conversations has been the relationship of the individual leader to what they know, what they feel certain about, which is a state of mind, but also to what they don't know and don't understand. And the parallel process there is that I, as their coach or as the consultant, have also been confronted with my own uncertainty in the face of what actually might be required here to support some kind of development or movement that makes sense to the client and that helps them to navigate their world and the challenges that they face. And because I'm a psychotherapist by training, but have really spent most of my working career in organizations, I tend to have take a kind of a go to the psychology. It's by no means the only map, but it's one that I find useful. And I think when we're in the territory of no silver bullets, becoming more conscious of the maps that we are using, whether implicitly or explicitly, to navigate the territory, can actually be very settling and very reassuring. So here are some perspectives drawn from a number of theoretical maps that relate to the experience that I have had with my clients and continue to have with my clients. There's a temptation to actually see theories as forms of silver bullets, and that's dangerous in that we then become rather evangelical about our particular theory and switch off to other theories that might be complementary or might reveal certain things that our current theoretical frame doesn't reveal. So implicit in all of this is an invitation to just let this wash over you. Let what I'm about to say wash over you and notice what resonates, what speaks to you and what doesn't. And whatever your experience is of this is absolutely fine and as it should be. So going right back to neurobiological basics, we are born hardwired with a nervous system that, among a whole range of important functions like controlling heartbeat and breath, also moderates our relationship to danger and risk, whether that's real or perceived. If we didn't have a nervous system, we probably wouldn't survive very long in the world outside of our immediate family environment. So our nervous system develops to take in data from the world and make sense of that data. And on the basis of the sense that we make, we develop a whole series of familiar patterns, familiar meaning frameworks that we then use to guide and orient us in the world. And when we're operating within familiar units of meaning, assumptions, perspectives, and they are fit for purpose. We tend to feel secure. When we encounter an experience that we don't understand or cannot understand immediately, that can activate the threat system in the nervous system, and all that you know about trauma and stress responses, fight, flight mechanisms kick in. Most important thing to remember with nervous system activation is the more activated the nervous system is, the less able we are to use our executive function, our ability to think about complex realities and make conscious choices about how to respond. We tend to go onto automatic pilot. Nurture, our experience and early experience of our upbringing and our developmental interactions with caregivers, has an important part to play in determining why some people's nervous systems are more sensitive to perceived risk or to uncertainty, whether that's actual or imagined, than others. The extent to which we experience a nurturing and responsive environment when we are very, very small has the effect of developing what the developmental psychologists call a secure base, people like Bowlby. In other words, we have a capacity to feel pretty safe and trusting in our experience of ourselves and the world, even when we're challenged and taken outside of our comfort zones. If we don't grow up in a enabling and supportive environment with people responding to our vulnerability, teaching us how to soothe ourselves through how they respond to us, we can become very anxious in the face of uncertainty. So the whole developmental literature helps me to make some assessments as I'm working with individuals and organizations about what's their level of tolerance for uncertainty, what in neurobiological terms is called the window of tolerance, the ability, the extent to which we can be taken out of our comfort zones and still function reasonably well, keep that neocortex online, and make sense of complex reality. Our identity is implicated in our relationship to uncertainty and certainty. We tend to, for a long time, identify with the images we hold of ourselves. So if we are identified with sorry, I've just seen Steve, something texted me. Okay, great. All right, no later than two. Fine. I shall canter through this. We tend to take ourselves to be the contents of our minds. So if I have developed a self-image, which is I am a competent OD practitioner, I am a capable and powerfully influencing executive coach who gets brilliant results with his clients, every time I experience a reality that doesn't shore up that image, in other words, I'm outside of my comfort zone, the client and I don't get on and form enough rapport or working alliance, if I can't see the extent to which I'm identified with being the capable one, then I'm likely to feel very insecure in my sense of self. In addition to that, we have ego ideals, which are the ideas we have about how we should be in order to function effectively in the world, to be successful, to be safe. And those ego ideals are often, well, always, to some extent, sanctioned and reinforced by social and cultural forces. So if we take the ones that I'm sure you're all familiar with, and there are millions of them, in most organizations that I've worked in, there is a privileging of knowing. In other words, one of the ego ideals is I have to be somebody who knows what to do in order to feel welcome here and safe here. Particularly the rather grandiose ego ideals of omniscience. Leaders must know everything in order to be capable leaders, and that's based on historical constructs of organization and leadership where knowledge capital was the currency. And also there's the ego ideal of omnipotence. In other words, I should be able to do everything that I put my mind to. I should be able to achieve everything that the organization wants to achieve. And if I can't, the assumption is that I'm lacking or deficient in some way. And maintaining these ego ideals can give us a lot of status, a lot of power, and a lot of privilege. And that's why people who are very enthralled to their ego ideals resist having those ideals and those self-images challenged, even when the disconfirming data, the real data that is pointing to the fact that all of us have feet of clay, all of us have our limitations. As that mounts up, you'll see certain personality types, of which there are many in senior leadership positions in countries and political systems at the moment. I shan't mention any names. I don't know why I'm pretending to be diplomatic. Trump, Johnson. The more reality challenges the ego ideal, the more tenaciously they will hold on to the image and willfully discount any data that disconfirms that reality, which leads us into the areas of narcissism and shame. Simple definition of narcissism is an over-identification with self-images to the exclusion of a perception of complex reality. And shame, one way to think about the experience of shame, it's what we feel when we fail to live up to those ego ideals. And all of this really drives a particular reaction in the nervous system, which is one of anxiety. And in the context of silver bullets, I'm finding it, and this is quite new, it's a quite new area of exploration for me. I'm finding it very helpful to explore and read around the two particular types of anxiety, neurotic and existential. So neurotic anxiety is the anxiety we experience when we actually or perceive we are losing control. When we're losing control of our images, when we're losing control of over our efficacy, over our impact in the world. If we have to shore up a sense of being competent, we'll experience a lot of neurotic anxiety and try harder and harder and harder to restore a sense of control and agency. We won't necessarily reflect or be able to manage our nervous system arousal so we can slow down, data gather, connect with others, make sense of complex realities, and then work towards generating realistic and situationally relevant solutions and next steps. We just want to restore control, consequences be damned. On the other hand, from an existential philosophical perspective, existential anxiety is the anxiety that we feel when we begin to know, to really get, and I'm not talking about getting just conceptually or intellectually, but we get to know in the depth of our being that actually control, self-images are just constructs of the mind. And actually we live in a universe which is far more complex than we like to think. And we are fundamentally meaning-making organisms. So in the face of the complexity and the potential meaninglessness of that complexity, we begin to take responsibility for ourselves as meaning-making machines. And we start to recognize that if we can tolerate the existential anxiety, then we can start to collaborate with others. We can start to make maps that are relevant to the complexity and the new territory that we're in, and restore, paradoxically, a sense of agency, but it isn't one that's about restoring control. We recognize control is a pipe dream, but actually the best we can do is be responsible for the meaning we make and the way that that meaning goes on to shape our choices and our actions in the world. So I'm going to stop there because I think bang on time pretty much.
Right, so I've sorted the technological issues. This was Mark's response to the question of what drives the need for silver bullets.
I think it's the fiction of fixability. I think if you're working in an ideological space where the expectation of you, particularly as a senior leader, the expectation is that you will get stuff fixed and you will be judged on the basis of that, you know, whether you do it or don't, then you're quickly looking around for what's the best solution. And so a silver bullet is the best solution. It's the way in which you pop, and the issue is managed in some fashion. And
so that was Mark's short take. Linda Holbeach, who had poor bandwidth problems, we both had bandwidth problems. Her response was pithy. Was this?
Oh gosh, I think that's definitely, as far as I can see, to do with anxiety, fear of failure, fear of the unknown, desperate desire to control one's own circumstances, which may include the organisation I run.
And the third one I'm going to share with you, aside from a quick look at my wonderful Zoom hair, lockdown hair, which we'll move on from.
There's probably lots of complicated answers to that. Fundamentally, though, I think there's one of the answers I think is true, is the we can't cope with not knowing. I think it's, I've rather glibly called it the recursive consciousness, because we know we don't know, and that's fucking terrifying, right? So it's like, it's horrible to not. We're kind of, I think we're probably unique in the animal kingdom because of the nature of the way our nervous system is made up, and the size of our brain, and the size of the cortex. Is what has emerged in human beings through a social process is the ability to know we exist.
So Graham's interview was interesting for a number of reasons. He introduced me to this lovely phrase, functional collusion. And my sense of everything that I'm writing about is actually patterns of functional collusion between multiple players. Just to give you a flavour of some of the other things that people said, and I'm not going to read these verbatim. Nothing irritates me more than people reading slides out verbatim, so I'm not going to do it. But I have picked out for you the words that resonate in response to that question. So a VP of change in a global FMCG spoke about fear, which taps into some of what Simon was saying. Niels Morrison's response was a very swift one of pace. And also I was struck by his comment that there's a level of laziness in this kind of defaulting to the first possible answer you're offered. Dr. Richard Clayton, a very interesting man based out of Hong Kong, connected all this to the Enlightenment and the promise of certainty that came with the Enlightenment. Jervis Bush talked about the craving for certainty, which again connects with some of what Simon was saying. Another internal client of mine talked about vulnerability and the expectations on leaders. And it's interesting, the internal clients I spoke to, I've spoken to 3 of them, and all 3 of them made very similar comments about observing the vulnerability and fear and the expectations on the leaders that they work with. And possibly the outlier in terms of just saying something different to everybody else was Glenda Ouyang, whose immediate response to this question was, well, it's about privilege. It's about the sense of privilege, and that people who believe they just have a default right to do whatever it is they want, which was a very different take. So those are some of the threads that emerged. So what I'm going to do now is put you into some breakout rooms for 10 minutes or so, and invite you to have a brief conversation in response to what we've shared with you, what's coming up for you in response to it. What are the implications for your practice, your clients, for organization? You interpret that as you will. You take that conversation where you will. But that's the sense of the territory that we're inviting you to explore. So I'm going to put you into breakout rooms now. Enjoy the conversations, and I shall bring you back shortly. Welcome back, everyone. Just wait for you all to rejoin. So on your screen now, if you could go to the Menti website and just share your reflections, just a reflection from your conversations would be lovely. So we get a sense of the conversations. So just go to menti.com again, and the next question.
Sorry, Steve, we were back just about a minute late.
Yes,
is there something we need to be doing?
Yes, sorry, it looked like I'd suddenly noticed that half of you were held in the ether somewhere. So yeah, on menti.com, if you could just share a reflection from your conversations. Thanks for...
Okay, thanks.
So just a brief reflection, if you're willing. It's interesting, this comment here, the pressure for the silver bullet is everywhere in all aspects of life. And noticing the word to the left there of fear. Remember what the origins of the silver bullet is. It comes from human folklore. The silver bullet was supposedly the thing that would kill the mythical beast most commonly associated with the werewolf. And in organizational terms, you could argue that some of these huge complex challenges that we face are as anxiety invoking as large hairy beasts with huge teeth. And so we look for the thing that will kill and slay that beast, even if the beast is inside ourselves. So thank you for putting your comments in. So all of that data will be shared with you afterwards, and we're going to slowly move our way towards the end of the session. And now on menti.com, it's a chance for you to actually ask me and Simon some questions. So if you have any questions, now is the time. Ask away. What questions have you got in the few minutes that we have?
Oh, we all sorted then?
Yeah. So next one is what on the menti.com, there's a space there for you to enter your questions if you have any. If you have no questions, then that's fine. Makes mine and Simon's life profoundly easier. Ah, there we go. Here they come.
Oh, I have.
Yes, I have two.
Excellent. Yeah. Have we explored this, vertical development? Not as yet.
Well, I can speak to that in terms of my own practice, which isn't what Steve and I are involved in, but I've been using maps of vertical development for over 15 years and find it a very useful lens. So this is the field of study around how our mental models and internal meaning-making processes and capacity for self-observation can evolve over time. And of course, one of the features that reinforces the belief in the silver bullet is the action logic, as it's called in vertical development, and particularly where the individual is at a stage of development where they take their meaning making to be sovereign. In other words, what I think is reality. They haven't yet developed the capacity to recognize that what I think is always a construct and therefore can be deconstructed and reconstructed in light of new data. So vertical development is a really useful map for those of you who already know it or who might be interested in finding out more about how to work with this territory.
Question for you, Simon, there. Are you saying that dealing with fear is the key thing?
At one level, yes, dealing with fear, and I suppose I would talk about it particularly in the context a bit more specifically of anxiety, and learning to resource ourselves in the face of what is unknown. And actually, as consultants and as coaches, we have a choice about whether we play into the quest for silver bullets by attempting to be the silver bullets through selling whatever the latest OD or coaching methodology might be, with the implicit promise that this will save you from your anxiety. And that can create all sorts of dependencies on consultants and drive the consulting industry, the purchase of expertise model. Or we can work at more psychological depth to support our clients and their systems to move from being in the grip of neurotic anxiety to working with and befriending existential anxiety, where they then become their own map makers. They don't need us to provide the maps.
Thanks, Simon. I'll just pick up a couple of these other ones. What's the research? Well, the research is qualitative at the moment and quantitative. The qualitative is in the region of 20 interviews with still 1 or 2 more to come. You will all be getting, along with the video, a link to the data gathering that I want to do, which will collect more quantitative data as well as a bit more qual, which will give me, hopefully, something more meaty and robust to flesh out some of the findings and some of the hypotheses that I have. One of the other questions, how do you switch people onto the idea of no silver bullet? I don't know whether it's my responsibility to switch them on. I think it's more about raising awareness of the fact that there is whatever it is that's going on in them that might be driving them to look for something that's oversimplified, and not doing anything that colludes with the idea that I, as a consultant and a facilitator, have an answer. I had one group ask me a while ago, why should we listen to you? And my immediate response was to laugh and say, well, you shouldn't. We need to not collude with this anxiety.
Can I come in there, Steve? It's Jeff now.
Yeah.
Let me give you a practical example of exactly what you're talking about. I was in a situation recently when there was a group from 3 of the big 4. There were three of people from each of 3 of the big 4, and myself as a sole trader. I knew what their plays were going to be because I got inside information. We had 45 minutes individually, and I stated when I got into the meeting that I wasn't there to collude. I didn't have any silver bullets, but we'd take it from there if they were interested. I didn't say that immediately, but I got down to that after 5 minutes. And they did not know how to cope with not being given answers, which all the big 3 were going to. They'd been in there for 3 to 4 years, all the 3, and achieved, in my judgment, highly judgmental, very, very, very little for lots and lots of money.
Yeah, Jeff, and that mirrors some of the other data I'm getting. That's absolutely, that fits. That fits.
And all I said basically was, I'm not here to collude with you. If you want somebody to collude, it isn't me.
Thanks, Jeff. It's a good example. I'm just going to pick up this last one before we move on and close. Last couple of points. I love this question. If destroying the idea of silver bullets also destroys the market for OD, would you still do it? Well, implicit in that is the idea that maybe OD has a silver bullet. I think one of the shadow side for OD is that sometimes those of us who carry the label are complicit in that. Because sometimes the most appropriate response to our clients is to not allow them to abdicate responsibility for things that rest with them. So I would like to debunk the idea of silver bullets. I don't think it will destroy the market for OD, because those of us who are doing the work that I think OD is there to do would not be colluding with the idea there is a guaranteed answer anyway. Yes, I love, Tony, your response there. Destroying the idea of silver bullets opens the market for OD. That is a far more succinct and elegant way of putting what was rattling around in clumsy terms in my head.
Well,
so
it might, destroying the idea of silver bullets might destroy the market for a particular type of collusive practice called OD, but open the market for real transformational learning in human systems. That's what I hope for.
Nice. So just as we move on and slowly close, the last things to share with you, I will be sending out to you all the recording, including the wonderful glitch due to the YouTube technical issue. There is no recording of the breakout rooms, so there'll be a 10-minute chunk cut out in the middle. You will also get a link to the newsletter for the project, the book and the research, and that goes out on not a regular basis. Sometimes it goes out once a week, sometimes every few weeks. And you will also get the opportunity, if you so desire, to see extracts from the book and comment on them as I slowly reveal them. There will be more of these webinars, as I want to run a number of them around the themes that are emerging from the work I'm doing. So one of the next ones will be with Mark Cole, and we're going to be tackling things like the relationship between silver bullets and leadership development as a field, and also the role that executive education and business schools play in that. Graham Curtis is going to be joining me for one as well, and I'm also working on some other ones so that they are not all populated by white middle-aged men like me and Simon and Mark and Graham. I'm fully conscious of the need to be diversity. It's just these are the ones that have so far gelled at the moment. So that's what's coming next. And finally, it would be lovely if you could just give me a bit of a sense of when you think the best time would be for the next webinar. So I've just got 2 last questions. It would really help me because I'm trying to work out whether to run the next ones in August or leave it until September, or indeed never again if you didn't enjoy this one. If you're willing just to give me a bit of data, that would be most kind.
Is that verbally now?
Yep, it's there now on menti.com. Okay, there's no more responses. Thank you. Okay, and the very last thing is just anything you want to leave me and Simon with in terms of how it was for you today. It could be a word, it could be a thought. It just helps me in terms of knowing what to do for the next ones. So as this comes in, I will say a goodbye as it's at 5 o'clock. Thank you. As soon as you put whatever thought you want in there, I will trust that you will leave and go about the rest of your business for today. You will get the email from me, probably not today, be by no later than Monday, with the various things I promised. And I hope to see some of you or all of you again, should you so desire. And thank you very much for coming and playing. Until next time. Simon, anything from you by way of a goodbye?
Just how lovely and energizing it is to share some of these ideas with other fellow travelers in the territory of the unknown. There you go. It's really lovely. So I wish you all well.
Thanks, everyone. Take good care.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you.
Bye, thanks.
Bye all.
Bye.
Bye.
See you, Rachel.
Steve?
Yeah.
Is that menti.com that does that scrolling, or do you do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lots of lovely comments again. One interesting comment there.
Do you want to turn the recording off?
Yeah. Hang on a minute.